The alien estate was huge, stretching far beyond the eye could see, with tall black walls that kept the outside world away. Inside, many slaves from different worlds worked every day under the orders of the master. Some carried heavy stones. Some worked in the gardens, some cleaned the halls. Everyone moved quickly. Afraid to be noticed in that place, fear was as common as the air they breathed. Among all the slaves, there was one who was different. Her name was Kira. She was thin. Her skin a pale silver that caught the light, but she never looked anyone in the eyes. Her head was always down, her hands always moving with quiet, careful speed. She spoke only when the overseers forced her to. Even then, her voice was small, like she didn't want the sound to escape her lips. The other slaves kept their distance from her, as if she carried something dangerous. Evan, a human worker brought here months ago, noticed her on his very first day. There was something strange about the way she moved, like she was always listening to something far away. He tried to talk to her once, offering a piece of bread when she looked tired, but she only gave him the smallest glance before walking away. After that, he stopped trying, but his eyes kept finding her in the crowd. The days passed in the same dull rhythm: work, eat, sleep, repeat. But one night when Evan couldn't sleep, he stepped outside his quarters to breathe the cool night air. The moon was high, casting silver light over the yard. That's when he saw her. Kira was out there, alone, kneeling on the ground, her hands moving slowly. She wasn't cleaning. She wasn't working. She was making shapes in the dirt, glowing shapes. Evan froze in the shadows, watching her fingers traced curves and lines, and as they did, a faint blue light began to follow her touch. The patterns spread across the ground like some kind of strange writing, symbols that made no sense to him but seemed alive under the moonlight. The glow was soft, yet it made the night feel strange, heavier somehow. Kira's face was calm, but her eyes darted around from time to time, checking to see if anyone was near. Evan leaned closer, his breath slow. He had never seen anything like this before. It was not the work of a slave. This was something secret, something she clearly didn't want the master or the guards to know. He thought about calling out to her, but something in his gut told him not to. After a few moments, Kira suddenly stopped. She looked around sharply, her hands quickly brushing over the dirt, erasing the glowing symbols until only plain soil remained. The blue light faded into nothing. She stood, brushed off her knees, and without a sound, walked back toward the sleeping quarters, disappearing into the darkness as if she had never been there. Evan stayed where he was, staring at the spot where the patterns had been. He tried to remember their shapes, but they were too strange for his mind to hold. They twisted and curved in ways he couldn't explain. His heart was beating faster than it should have. He didn't know why. It wasn't fear exactly. It was curiosity, the kind that burns in your chest and won't let go. He went back inside, but sleep didn't come. Instead, his mind kept going back to what he saw. The soft glow in the dirt, the quick way she had erased it, and the look in her eyes. It was not the look of someone defeated. No. It was the look of someone hiding something important, something worth risking everything for. The next day, Evan kept glancing at her while they worked. She moved the same as always, silent, careful, distant. But now he noticed more. He saw how her eyes flicked towards certain corners of the yard, how she kept her hands hidden in her sleeves when the guards passed. She was not just another slave. He was sure of it now, by the time the sun set again. Evan had made up his mind. He didn't know what her secret was, but he was going to find out. He had lived long enough in fear to know that some chances only come once, and something told him that whatever Kira was doing out there in the moonlight, it was going to change both their lives, maybe even more than that. That night, as the camp quieted and the cold crept in, Evan sat awake, listening for the faintest sound of footsteps. If she went out again, he would be ready to follow. And this time, he would not let her erase her secret before he could understand it. His hands tightened into fists. The air felt heavier, like the night itself was waiting for something to happen. And somewhere in the dark, Kira was moving toward her hidden purpose. The morning came with a pale, cold light, the kind that made the whole estate look even more lifeless. Slaves moved like shadows, carrying heavy baskets, scrubbing stone floors, or pushing carts along the dirt paths. Evan worked among them, but his mind was not on the tasks. His thoughts kept going back to the strange glowing patterns Kira had drawn in the dirt the night before. He kept stealing glances at her, hoping she might look his way, but she didn't. Her eyes stayed low, her face blank. She acted as though nothing had happened. Evan decided he had to speak to her, to hear something from her own mouth. When the overseers turned their attention to another group, he walked toward her, but she stepped away before he could get close. She kept doing that all morning, never letting him near enough to whisper. He could feel her avoiding him on purpose, and it only made him more certain that she was hiding something. Hours passed, the sun rose high, and the air grew warmer. By midday, the slaves were sent to fetch supplies from the storage building. This was Evan's chance. Inside the storage room, it was dim and smelled of dust. Barrels and crates filled the walls. There were no guards here right now, just the two of them. Evan closed the door behind him. Kira froze, her hands tightening. Around a small sack of grain. "I saw you last night," Evan said quietly, his voice steady. "I saw the light in the dirt." Kira didn't move for a moment, her shoulders stiff. Then she turned her head slightly, her eyes narrow, but not angry. More like she was afraid. She spoke in a low whisper, so soft he almost missed the words, "Don't watch me at night, human. It's dangerous." Her words sent a chill through him. Dangerous. She didn't say it was wrong or forbidden. She said dangerous. Why? "What's dangerous about drawing shapes?" Kahi asked. Stepping closer, she shook her head, glancing at the door. "You don't understand," she murmured. "If you see too much, I'll see you too." Evan frowned, not sure what she meant. But the tone in her voice made him believe it wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. Still, his curiosity was too strong. "Then tell me what it is," he insisted. "If I know, maybe I can help, for a moment." Kira's eyes locked with his. There was a depth there, something heavy and guarded. Then she dropped her gaze. "Forget what you saw," she whispered. "Please." And she moved past him. But before she reached the door, she stopped, her voice trembling. "If you follow me again, you'll be pulled into this, and there's no going back." She left the storage room without another word, leaving Evan standing there in the dim light, his heart beating fast. Her warning only made him more determined if there was a danger. He wanted to know what it was that night. When the camp grew quiet, Evan stayed awake in his bed, listening to the soft noises of the night. The distant shuffle of feet, the faint call of night creatures beyond the walls. And then, there it was, soft steps, lighter than the guards. Moving toward the far end of the yard, he rose quietly, keeping his own steps silent. And followed at a distance, Kira moved like a shadow, her silver skin catching small glints of moonlight. She didn't take the same path as last night. This time she slipped past the gardens, through a narrow gap between two sheds. Evan kept far enough so she wouldn't hear him. The air was cooler here, the ground soft with fallen leaves. She stopped near a part of the estate he had never seen before, an old crumbling stone arch covered in vines. The guards never came. Here, the place felt forgotten. Kira knelt before it, her hands hovering over the stones. Then the air around her began to change, a faint shimmer rising like heat from the ground. Her skin took on a soft, otherworldly glow. Evan crouched behind a broken wall, peering through a gap, his breath caught in his throat. She began moving her hands again, faster this time, not on the dirt, but in the air itself. Glowing lines formed where her fingers passed, weaving together into shapes he didn't recognize. They hung there, bright and alive, casting strange shadows on her face. The hum began again, low at first, then growing stronger. It felt like it was inside his bones. He wanted to step closer, to see more, but something told him to stay hidden. Her warning echoed in his mind. Still, he couldn't look away. And then, just as suddenly as it began, she froze, her head tilting slightly as if she had heard something. Evan's chest tightened. Had she sensed him? He pressed himself against the wall, heart racing. He counted the seconds in his head. The hum faded, the glow dimmed, and when he dared to look again, she was gone. No footsteps, no sound. Just the faint warmth in the air where she had been. Evan stayed there for a while, staring at the empty arch, his thoughts spinning. He didn't know what the glowing shapes meant, but one thing was certain. Kira was no ordinary slave. And whatever she was doing out here, it was tied to something far bigger and far more dangerous than he had imagined. And now he was already too close to walk away. Evan stayed crouched behind the broken wall, his knees aching, but he didn't move. The night was so still that he could hear his own heartbeat. The air where Kira had been still felt different, heavier, as if it had soaked up some kind of strange energy. He wanted to step out, to walk to that stone arch and touch it. But something deep inside told him not to. It was as if the place itself was holding its breath. When he finally stood, he kept his eyes on the arch. The vines curled around its edges. The old stones cracked and worn. Yet there was something about it that felt alive, like it was waiting for something. He stepped closer, slow and careful, his boots crunching softly on the ground in the faint moonlight. He could still see traces of light where her hands had moved. Fading lines hanging in the air like ghostly smoke, they twisted and shimmered, then slowly melted away. He reached out his hand toward one of the fading lines, and for just a moment he thought he felt warmth, like touching sunlight trapped in the air. Then it vanished completely, leaving only the cold night. Evan's fingers curled into a fist, his mind raced with questions. What were those shapes? Why did they glow? And why did she come here to make them? A sudden sound made him freeze. It wasn't loud, just the faintest shift of a leaf, but out here, in the silence, it was enough to send his heart pounding. He looked around, his eyes sweeping the shadows. Was it her? Had Kira come back? Or was it someone else? He pressed his back to the broken wall again, listening. Seconds stretched into minutes. Nothing moved, but the sense of being watched would not leave him. He finally decided to leave before he pushed his luck too far. The path back to the slave quarters felt longer than usual, every step echoing in his ears. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see her silver figure in the distance, but the yard stayed empty. When he finally lay down on his rough bed, he couldn't sleep. His mind kept playing the scene over and over, the way her hands moved, the way the light followed her touch, the low hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. It didn't feel like some simple trick. It felt important, like a piece of something much bigger. And now he was caught in it. The next day passed slowly. Evan kept working, but his eyes followed Kira whenever she was near. She avoided him again, but this time, he thought he saw something in her expression, a flicker of worry, maybe even fear. When the overseer called her name, she stiffened, but answered quietly, then went back to work, never looking up. It was as if she was building a wall between them. Evan thought about approaching her again, but the memory of her warning still echoed in his head. If you follow me again, you'll be pulled into this. Maybe he already had been. Maybe last night had already tied him to whatever she was hiding. He didn't know if that was good or bad, only that it made the air around her feel different now. Charged, That night, he couldn't help himself. When the camp went quiet, he slipped out once more. But this time, he stayed farther back, watching from deeper in the shadows. The moonlight spilled silver over the estate, and there she was, moving silently toward the old arch again. Evan crept closer, careful not to step on anything that might make noise. When she reached the arch, she didn't hesitate. Her hands began to move, but faster than before, as if she had less time. The glowing lines formed again, but this time they were brighter, more vivid, each one hanging in the air like a ribbon of living light, twisting and curling into shapes that looked almost alive. The hum returned, deeper now. It seemed to vibrate in his chest. He felt his skin prickle. The air around him warmer than the night should allow. He leaned forward slightly, trying to see more. The shapes began to connect, forming a pattern like a web. A glowing map of symbols and lines that pulsed as if it had a heartbeat. Suddenly, Kira stopped, her head turning slightly toward where Evan hid. His breath caught. She couldn't possibly see him in the dark, could she? But the way her eyes narrowed told him she knew. She didn't speak, didn't move for a long moment. Then turned back to the glowing web, her fingers tracing one last line before the light began to fade. The hum weakened, the warmth slipped away, and as the final symbol dissolved into the night, Kira lowered her hands. She stood in silence, her head bowed. Then she stepped through the arch, vanishing, not walking away, not fading into the shadows, simply gone. As if the night had swallowed her whole, Evan stumbled forward, his eyes wide. He reached the arch and ran his hands over the stones. There was nothing there, just cold rock and vines, but he had seen it. She had stepped into something that wasn't there before. His hands trembled. He didn't know whether to feel afraid or amazed. He backed away slowly, staring at the arch as if it might open again, but nothing happened. The night was still once more. Only the faint smell of warm air lingered, and the echo of that deep hum in his bones. He knew now whatever Kira was hiding, it was far beyond anything he had imagined, and he was in it, whether he wanted to be or not. The morning light crept slowly over the estate, but Evan barely noticed it. He had not slept. The image of Kira stepping through the arch and vanishing was burned into his mind. He kept turning it over in his head, trying to understand how it was possible. There were no machines, no doors, no tricks. She had simply disappeared. The thought made his chest feel tight, half with fear, half with a strange excitement. When work began, he saw her across the yard, moving as if nothing had happened. Her head down, her steps steady, the same quiet, careful rhythm she always had. But now he noticed something else in her movements, a slight stiffness in her shoulders, a tension in the way her fingers curled when the overseer passed too close. She was on edge, and she was avoiding looking in his direction completely. By midday, Evan could not take it anymore. He waited until the overseer shouted orders to the other side of the yard. Then he crossed to where she was carrying water from the well. She saw him coming and tried to step aside. But he moved quickly, blocking her path. What happened last night? He asked in a low voice, his eyes fixed on hers. Where did you go? Kira's gaze flicked toward the guards, then back to him. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Why are you not afraid of me? The question caught him off guard. Afraid? He repeated. Why would I be afraid? Her eyes darkened, and for a moment, he thought she might push past him. But instead, she stood still, her voice low and tight, because if they find out what you saw, they will kill us both. Evan leaned in slightly. Then tell me, he said, tell me what this is, so I can understand. She hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if weighing something. Finally, she looked down at the bucket in her hands. Those symbols, she said softly, they are not just patterns. They are part of a map, a key. To an old escape gate. It can take me far from here, away from him. Evan's brow furrowed. The master? She gave the smallest nod. Yes, away from this place, away from his chains. Her voice trembled. But the gate only opens once every many years, and the time is almost here. Evan felt his heartbeat quicken. You can't do it alone, can you? Her lips pressed into a thin line. No, I can't, she admitted. The gate needs more than one to open fully. It needs a witness, a keeper of the path. Someone to stand while the other crosses. She looked up at him, and for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. But helping me means you will be hunted too. Before he could answer, a sharp voice rang out across the yard. The master's chief overseer calling for them. Kira's expression closed off instantly. The hope vanished as she turned away, walking toward the sound without another word. Evan stood still, watching her go, his mind spinning. The rest of the day was tense. He could feel eyes on him. The master himself seemed to be watching from the balcony of his hall, tall and unmoving, his silver eyes cold as glass. When Evan's gaze met his, there was a weight in it, like the master was searching his thoughts. Later, when the sun dipped, Lo Evan was summoned to the hall. The massive doors opened to reveal the master seated in a high chair carved from black stone. The room was dim, lit only by flickering lamps. The human, the master said, his voice deep and smooth. You have been here some time. You work hard. His eyes narrowed. Tell me about the silver-skinned girl. Evan forced himself to keep his face calm. She works hard, too, he said, quiet. Never causes trouble. The master studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. Though the faint curl of his mouth told Evan he was not convinced. Good, the master said at last. You may go. When Evan returned to the yard, the sky was already darkening. He found Kira near the edge of the sleeping quarters, her eyes darting to the shadows when she saw him. She stepped into the narrow space between two buildings, out of sight from the others. They're watching you now, she said quickly, her voice urgent. The master suspects something. We have to move faster. Evan stepped closer. You said the gate will open soon. How soon? Her eyes locked on his. 3 nights, she said. 3 nights. And then not again for many years. Her hands tightened at her sides. If we fail, he will destroy it, and me with it. Evan felt the weight of her words sink into him. 3 nights, a chance to help her escape, a chance to defy the master, and a chance to find out the truth about what lay beyond that glowing arch. He didn't know what waited there, but one thing was clear, he was already too far in to turn back. That night, as the estate settled into uneasy silence, the moon hid behind clouds, and the air felt heavier than usual. Evan lay awake, thinking of the choice ahead of him. The danger was real. But so was the pull of that strange light, and the secret Kira carried, somewhere deep inside. He already knew his answer. The sky was pale and cold the next morning, a thin mist hanging over the estate. The air felt heavy, as if it carried a warning. Evan could sense it in the way the other slaves moved, quieter than usual. Their eyes flicking nervously toward the guards. Something had changed. The rhythm of the place was different by mid-morning. The reason became clear. More guards were on patrol than usual, their boots thudding against the packed dirt, their weapons hanging at their sides, their eyes sharp. They were not just watching the slaves, they were searching, their gazes sweeping over every face, lingering a little too long on Kira. Evan tried to keep his head down, but it was impossible not to notice the master himself watching from the high balcony again, tall, still, his silver eyes like blades. He spoke to one of the overseers, and the man nodded before hurrying away. Moments later, the overseer came straight toward Evan. You, the overseer barked. The master wants words with you. Evan's stomach tightened, but he followed, keeping his steps even. Inside the hall, The air was cooler. Shadows stretching across the black stone floor. The master sat in his great chair, his long fingers resting lightly on the arms. "You have been near the silver-skinned Gid." 1. The master said without greeting, "Tell me, Haas, she's spoken to you." Evan forced himself to meet the master's gaze. "Only about work," he said. "She is quiet, nothing more." The master's eyes narrowed slightly, his voice soft but dangerous. "She is not nothing. Human, she is trouble." He leaned forward just enough for his shadow to stretch across the floor. "If you see her doing anything unusual, you will come to me." "Yes, master," Evan said, his tone flat. He was dismissed, but as he stepped out of the hall, he felt the master's stare burning into his back. The warning was clear. They were already too close to being discovered. That night, when the work was done and the slaves were allowed to rest, Evan found Kira sitting alone in the dim corner of the yard, her posture tense, her eyes fixed on the dirt as though she were counting the grains. He moved closer, speaking just above a whisper. "He's watching us. More guards too, I know," she said, without looking up. "He feels it. The time is near." She finally met his gaze. Her voice quick and sharp. "We have only 3 nights, and now every moment is dangerous." Evan sat beside her, his voice low. "Then tell me what I need to do." Her eyes scanned the yard before she spoke. "When the gate opens, the master will feel it. He will come. His guards will come. They always do. Someone must hold them back while the other crosses. The crossing takes time. The symbols must be completed in one flow. If they break, the gate closes." Evan felt a cold weight in his stomach. "So one of us stays behind to fight?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady, but her hands tightening in her lap. "But I have waited too long. I will not stop now. I will open the gate, I will step through, and you will hold them back." She looked at him hard. "If you agree, you may never see your home again. If you refuse, I will go alone and I will die." Her words hung in the air between them. Evan thought of the nights he had seen her glowing in the dark, of the way she had erased the symbols when she heard the smallest sound, of the strength in her voice when she finally told him the truth. He nodded slowly. "I'll be there." The next day was worse. The guards were restless, snapping at the slaves, punishing small mistakes. Even the overseers seemed uneasy. And the master never left his balcony, his eyes scanning the yard as though he expected something to burst from the ground. Evan and Kira avoided speaking to each other during the day. They could not risk being seen too close, but each time they passed, her eyes met his for just a second. Enough to say they were still ready that night. Kira came to him in the shadows of the sleeping quarters. 2 nights left, she whispered. "Tomorrow we prepare. The night after, we move." She pressed something into his hand, a small, flat piece of metal carved with strange lines. "This is a marker," she said. "If I fall before the gate is open, you use it. It will show you the first steps." Evan looked at it in the faint light. The carvings felt warm under his fingers. "And if you fall after it's open?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just stepped back into the dark, leaving him standing there with the metal in his palm, feeling its strange heat. He didn't know if it was hope or fear that was making his hands shake. The estate was too quiet. As the night deepened, the mist returned, curling low over the ground, somewhere in the dark. The master's guards walked their rounds, but their steps sounded heavier, as if they were preparing for something too. Evan lay awake, the small metal marker under his pillow, thinking about the next 2 nights. Every choice from here on would lead to only 2 endings, freedom or death. And there would be no turning back. The night came heavy with clouds. No moonlight to guide the way. The estate lay under a thick silence, broken only by the occasional creak of wood or the soft shuffle of a guard's boots. The air smelled faintly of smoke from the fires that burned low in the master's hall. Evan stood in the shadow of a storage shed. every muscle in his body tense. Tonight was the night. Kira appeared from the darkness like she had stepped out of the air itself, her silver skin catching just a hint of the torchlight from far away. Her eyes were sharp, her voice low. "The guards are restless. They know something is near," she said. "We have to move fast." Evan nodded, pulling the small pouch from his belt. Inside was the oil-soaked cloth he had prepared earlier. They slipped toward the barn without speaking, staying low, their steps silent. Evan's heart pounded in his ears. They had only one chance to distract the guards. He pushed the door open, just enough to slip inside. The smell of hay and dry wood filled his nose. He struck the small flint, sparks catching on the cloth. A faint flame flickered to life. Within moments, the hay began to smolder, smoke curling upward. "Go," Kira whispered urgently. They slipped out the back, keeping to the shadows. Behind them, the smoke thickened. The fire crackled louder. Then the first shout came from the yard, the guards' voices rising in alarm. Feet pounded across the dirt. More shouts. The fire was doing its job. Kira led the way, moving quickly but with precision, weaving between sheds, ducking behind stacks of barrels. The path she took seemed to avoid every place the guards would run. Evan realized she must have memorized these routes for months, maybe years. They reached the far edge of the estate, where the ground sloped gently toward the forgotten part of the wall. The old stone arch loomed in the distance, half hidden in vines. In the flicker of torchlight from far away, it looked almost like it was waiting for them. Kira's pace quickened, her breathing controlled but urgent. Evan stayed close, glancing over his shoulder. In the distance, he saw the orange glow of the fire growing brighter, the guards still shouting, but the sound was beginning to shift. Some of them were breaking off, maybe realizing not everyone was where they should be. They had little time left. At the arch, Kira stepped forward without hesitation, her hands lifting, her fingers tracing the air in those strange flowing motions. Lines of light began to appear. Where her hands passed, brighter this time, urgent, alive. The hum started again. Low at first, then deepening. The ground under Evan's boots seemed to tremble faintly. Evan kept watch, scanning the shadows for movement. Every nerve in his body alert. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Not long," she said, her voice tight with focus. "But they will come before it is done." The glowing lines multiplied, weaving together into a pattern so bright it painted the arch in silver and gold. The air within the stone frame shimmered like heat on a summer road, then began to swirl, forming a spiral of light. Evan had seen strange things in his life, but nothing like this. It was as if the night itself was being pulled into another place. And then voices, close now, rough and sharp. Boots striking the dirt fast. Evan turned to see figures in the dark, their silver armor catching the faint glow of the arch. The master's guards, and behind them, a taller shadow, the master himself, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Keep working," Evan said, stepping forward, placing himself between Kira and the approaching shapes. He could feel his pulse in his throat. The master's voice cut through the night, cold and furious. "Stop her!" The guards rushed forward. Evan grabbed a fallen branch from the ground, gripping it like a weapon. The first guard swung his blade. Evan ducked and shoved the branch into his side. The man stumbled. Another came at him, and Evan swung hard, knocking the blade from his hand. He could hear Kira behind him, the hum growing louder. The light from the arch spilling over the ground. The master stepped closer, his silver eyes locked on Evan. "You are nothing but a human slave," he said, his voice low but cutting. "Step aside and I may let you live." Evan tightened his grip on the branch. "Not tonight," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. The master's face darkened. He signaled to the remaining guards. Two charged at once. Evan blocked one strike, ducked under another. But a sharp pain flared in his arm as a blade grazed him. He gritted his teeth, pushing forward. Using his weight to knock one guard to the ground, behind him, Kira's voice rose in a strange chant, her hands moving faster than ever. The air within the arch swirled wildly, the spiral deepening until it became a tunnel of pure light. The hum turned into a deep, resonating tone that seemed to shake the very stones. Now, she called, her voice carrying through the chaos. Evan risked a glance back. The gate was open, the light spilling outward in waves, but the master was close now, his long hand reaching toward Kira. Evan stepped into his path, shoving hard, forcing him back. Go. Evan shouted. Kira's eyes met his for a single heartbeat, and then she turned toward the arch, stepping forward into the light. Her silver skin blazing against the glow, the air around her shimmering as if trying to hold her in place. Then she vanished into the tunnel. Swallowed by the brightness, Evan stood his ground. The master's roar shaking the air, the light from the gate spilling over them both. But in that moment, he knew whether he followed or fell here, she was free. The air around the arch shook with light, the hum deep and heavy. Evan's chest rose and fell fast as he faced the master. The man's silver eyes burned with fury. Behind him, the guards hesitated, as if unsure whether to attack or step back from the strange glow. The gate's light spilled over the ground like a pool of liquid silver. Kira was gone, swallowed by that light. But Evan could still feel the faint warmth in the air where she had stood. The master's voice cut through the noise, sharp and cold. You will regret this, human. His tone was not just anger, it was a promise. He moved forward, his long fingers curling like claws. Evan stepped back toward the arch, the heat from it licking against his skin. His arm ached from the cut he'd taken, but he kept his grip on the branch. It was nothing against the master's strength, but it was all he had. The master lunged, fast as a striking beast. Evan swung the branch with all his strength. The crack against the master's side made him stagger, but only for a moment. The master's hand shot out, gripping Evan's shoulder with crushing force. Pain flared down his arm. You are mine, the master hissed. But Evan shoved back hard, using his weight to break free behind him. The light from the arch began to flicker, the hum shifting. The gate would not stay open for long. Evan's mind raced. If he stayed, he would be cut down in seconds if he stepped through. There was no telling what lay on the other side, but one thing was certain. The master caught Kira again. All of this would have been for nothing. The master came at him again, faster this time. A blade flashing in his hand, Evan ducked low. The blade slicing the air above his head, he surged forward, slamming his shoulder into the master's chest. The impact drove them both back. But Evan was already moving, spinning toward the light. In that split second, the world seemed to slow. The swirling tunnel of light filled his vision, and within it, just for an instant, he saw her Kira waiting, her form no longer small and bent, but tall, strong, her silver skin glowing with patterns of deep blue, markings that moved like rivers under her skin. Her eyes were bright, full of something he had never seen in her before. Freedom. Her voice echoed in his mind, though her lips did not move. Come with me. It was not a plea, it was an invitation. Behind him, the master roared, his footsteps pounding the ground, the heat of his fury almost as real as the heat from the gate. Evan didn't think twice. He stepped forward into the light. The world tilting and pulling at him, the sound of the estate, the master's shouts. The guard's boots, all of it stretched and faded, replaced by a rushing wind that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The pull grew stronger, wrapping around him, lifting him. For a moment, he felt weightless. Then the light shifted, softening, and he stumbled forward onto solid ground. The air was different, here clean, sharp, with the faint scent of flowers carried on the wind. The sky above was deep and endless, filled with strange, shimmering stars. Ahead, Kira stood waiting, her back straight, her head high. She was nothing. Like the slave he had known in the estate, her clothing shimmered like woven silver. Her markings bright and alive. "You're not." Evan began, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't know how to finish. Not a slave. Not the frightened girl he had first seen. She smiled faintly. "I am the last princess of my people," she said, her voice steady. "Taken when my kingdom fell, hidden here, waiting for the gate to open again." Evan stared at her, the truth settling in like a heavy stone. All this time she had been more than anyone guessed. "And you would have died if the master caught you," he said. "Yes," she answered. "And you would have died for helping me." He gave a tired half-smile. "Guess we're both lucky then." She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. "I owe you my life, but more than that, you chose to stand when you could have walked away." She glanced toward the horizon where distant shapes moved tall. Graceful towers that seemed to grow from the earth, glowing faintly in the night. "Come, there is much to do." Evan looked once over his shoulder, the swirling light of the gate shrinking until it winked out completely. Leaving only the quiet night of this new world, the master was gone. The estate was far behind, and ahead lay something unknown. Maybe dangerous, but free. He followed her toward the towers. The grass soft under his feet, the wind cool against his face. He didn't know what waited in this place, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was moving toward something worth finding, somewhere behind them, in the dark of the old estate. The master's roar would fade into silence, but here, under the strange sky, the story was only just beginning.